At the beginning of the movie, we are taken to a place in Afghanistan, where we are shown a businessman from America named Donovan. At that time, Donovan and his secretary were laundering money by transferring millions of dollars. After successfully transferring the money, they plan to return to America soon. Meanwhile, outside the room, there are already countless soldiers who are Donovan's men. Under very heavy guard, they would escort Donovan and his secretary safely out of Afghanistan. However, when he was just about to get into the car, suddenly there was an RPG attack that destroyed one of Donovan's men. Not only that, the attacks continued to cause many of Donovan's men to die. On one occasion, the secretary decided to run away, but she was killed by just one shot. After killing all of them and leaving only Donovan, we find out that the attack was carried out by 4 highly trained special forces. It is said that these 4 soldiers are the most wanted fugitives in the world, especially in America, because they often kill civilians. They did this because Donovan had betrayed them in the past. Then Donovan was asked about all the money he had just transferred. At first, Donovan was just silent, which made him have to be shot in the leg. Donovan finally said that he had transferred all the money to a bank in America. Knowing this, without hesitation, they immediately killed Donovan there and then. The scene switches to the city of Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan. You can see a woman in a red hood walking in a crowd of residents. It turns out that the woman intends to sell illegal antiquities to a fence. When the transaction was in progress, they were suddenly ambushed by security forces, who immediately arrested them. In this scene, we are finally informed that the woman is an undercover agent to eradicate the sale of illegal antiquities. The female agent's name is Rossi. Not long after that, Rossi was contacted by her boss to go to the massacre of the Donovan group, which was carried out by 4 special soldiers. Arriving there, Agent Rossi immediately identified the bodies of Donovan and the secretary. After getting information from headquarters, Rossi said that Donovan was the leader of a contractor company that was profiting from the war. Not only that, Donovan is also the one who supplies weapons to conflict countries, including Afghanistan. After that, the investigators said, based on their analysis, Donovan was attacked by special forces, whose weapons were made in America. Hearing this, Rossi replied that she already suspected that the perpetrators who attacked Donovan were the 4 fugitives of the special forces who were currently most wanted. It turned out that the 4 special soldiers had also been involved in military attacks and were involved in antiquities smuggling networks and bank robberies. A few weeks later, the scene moves to America, where we will be introduced to a policeman named Mike. Currently, Mike is carrying out his duties, which include patrolling around the city because, since the sale of illegal weapons, many have occurred in America, and there have been many crime cases in this city. On the other hand, Mike's daughter, Lisa, was very happy because she was found to be pregnant, and her husband was named Steve. Steve, who knows Lisa is pregnant, is very happy because the results of his sex every night finally give something. It is known that Steve is also a police officer like Mike. Meanwhile, in a school toilet, it shows a student who is being bullied by his friends, the student named Kenny who can't take it anymore because he keeps on bullying. This time he tries to fight back and manages to beat the student who keeps on bullying him. The next day, the scene shifts to Agent Rossi, who is now in America. At that time, Rossi went to a man who was an arms seller. Here Agent Rossi says, if she knows this man is the person who has sold the weapons to 4 special soldiers who are now fugitives, because it is known, one of the 4 special soldiers is this man's friend. For this reason, Agent Rossi offers a deal. Agent Rossi promises not to arrest the man as long as the man wants to tell where the 4 special soldiers are now. Feeling that there is no choice, the man finally gives the address where they are hiding. Meanwhile, at school, as a result of Kenny's act of hitting his friend yesterday, now his mother is calling and confronting the headmaster. Here, the headmaster said that Kenny had hit one of the students to the point of being admitted to the hospital. For that, Kenny will be punished by participating in patrols with the police for 1 week. Kenny's mother had resisted the punishment, but the headmaster said that if Kenny did not receive that punishment, then the school would expel him. In the end, Kenny's mother agreed if her son would help the police on patrols for 1 week. The story back to Mike, who turns out that Mike is still often sad after the death of his wife. Not only that, Mike is also now not on good terms with his daughter, Lisa. Lisa is disappointed with Mike because he is always considered busy with work, to the point where he forgets his obligation to be the husband of Lisa's late mother. Steve, as Lisa's husband, keeps reminding Lisa not to hate Mike because, after all, Mike is Lisa's biological father. Shortly thereafter, Steve was picked up by Mike to go to the office. Meanwhile, at a bank, there are millions of dollars in deposits that have been deliberately saved. It turned out that the bank was also the target of the robbery by 4 Special Forces fugitives. It can be seen that they are preparing weapons because today, their action will be carried out. One of them was visiting a restaurant that was close to the bank they were going to rob. This person's job was to plant a bomb that was placed under the restaurant table. This was done to divert the situation if, later, their action to rob the bank did not go smoothly. Meanwhile, Kenny's mother is taking Kenny to the police station to serve his sentence from school. It turns out that today Kenny will join the patrol with Mike and Steve. While on patrol, Mike received a report that there had been bullying at a shop. It was then that they rushed to the scene. When they got there, Mike and Steve caught the robber. Then Mike asked another police unit to take the crook to the police station. Scene back to the 4 special soldiers, who are now preparing to carry out the action. They look very relaxed, because according to them, crimes like this are not something scary. After they left, Agent Rossi came to the hideout and went to the special soldiers' place. Agent Rossi certainly didn't find them, and only found scraps of paper from an explosive. Meanwhile, the 4 special soldiers had arrived at the bank that they would rob, and then they went inside. Everyone there was ordered to bow down, and if anyone resisted, they would be killed. One of them, it seems, is a guard in the car to monitor the situation outside. The bank manager was forced to open the safe, and then all the money was put in a bag. On the other hand, Mike, Steve, and Kenny are near the bank. Steve went out to buy coffee. Here, Mike asked Kenny, why did Kenny get punished by his school? Kenny replied that he was a student who was often bullied, but because he could no longer stand the bullying, Kenny had the courage to fight back, and the person who was bullying him was admitted to the hospital. Shortly after Steve came from buying coffee, Mike saw a suspicious car parked in a restricted area. Realizing that the police were approaching them, one of the robbers who was standing guard in the car felt a bit worried because he had no choice. Finally, his friends allowed this man to detonate a bomb that had been installed in a restaurant to distract Mike and Steve. Unfortunately, Mike and Steve ignored the explosion and still wanted to find out who was in the black car. On the other hand, all police units were deployed to help the victims and secure the explosion site. Meanwhile, Kenny's mother, who was the head of the hospital, ordered all doctors and nurses to prepare to accommodate the victims of the explosion. Agent Rossi, who also heard the news of the explosion, immediately thought that the explosion must have been carried out by the 4 fugitives that she is currently looking for. Agent Rossi immediately headed to the scene of the explosion. Back to one of the robbers standing guard at the car. Realizing that Steve and Mike did not want to leave, he immediately got ready and then attacked Mike's car. Feeling cornered, Mike and Steve tried to get away and immediately contacted the other police to come here immediately because the explosion was only a diversion. Steve, who was about to leave, suddenly couldn't open his seatbelt and almost became the target of shots. After successfully getting rid of him, Steve helped Mike shoot one of the robbers. On one occasion, the robber managed to shoot Steve's thigh, who was currently securing Kenny. But in the end, the robber's leg was also shot by Mike. Feeling cornered, the robber immediately fled in a car. But here, Mike is able to shoot right into the head of the robber, killing him there and then. After that, it shows Steve starting to bleed out from a gunshot wound to his thigh. Kenny tried to help Steve keep the blood from flowing out. At the hospital, Kenny's mother and the doctors were starting to get overwhelmed with the many victims of the explosion. Shortly thereafter, Kenny's mother also received news that this hospital would receive another victim from the robbery. Agent Rossi, who was also at the explosion site, tried to ask one of the restaurant waiters if he was still alive. After showing a photo of the fugitives, the waiter said that one of them had come to this restaurant in the morning. This means that Agent Rossi's assumption is correct. The chaos that is happening now is the work of the 4 fugitives she is looking for. When the city police arrived at the place of the robbery, the robbers immediately greeted them with the weapons they had prepared. One by one, the police were shot by the 3 remaining robbers. Lisa was at home, and she was very worried after receiving news of the shooting incident in front of the bank. Lisa realized that, at this moment, her husband and father must be there. Meanwhile, Steve asks Kenny to make a farewell video if he doesn't survive this incident. In the video, Steve says that he really loves Lisa and the baby in her stomach. While shedding tears, Steve also apologized if he couldn't take care of their child together later. Shortly after, Steve was finally taken by the police to immediately go to the hospital. But Kenny was scared. He preferred to get into one of the cars. After Steve was put in the ambulance, Mike realized that Kenny was not following them. Not long after, Mike got a call from Lisa, who asked how he and Steve were doing. Mike replied that he was fine, but Steve was shot and is now being taken to the hospital. Hearing this, Lisa immediately went to the hospital to see the condition of her husband. Here, Lisa was quite shocked when she saw that her husband was dying. Meanwhile, Kenny, who was in the car, used a battery in the doll to charge his cell phone. After his cell phone was turned on, Kenny immediately contacted his mother. Kenny said that he was in the car and felt very scared. His mother, who was treating the victim, told Kenny to stay calm and be patient until help arrived. The day is getting dark, but this incident is not over yet. At the scene of the robbery, Mike is a little annoyed at his police colleagues who came late, even though Mike had told him that the explosion was just a diversion while the real war was in front of the bank. Because of the actions of the police, who always arrive late, Steve is now dying. Agent Rossi, who was also there, told the SWAT team leader to be more careful against the robbers. Agent Rossi explained that the robbers were special soldiers who were highly trained in combat. It was even recorded that they had killed 30 troops. Meanwhile, inside the bank, you can see the 3 robbers, who are very relaxed in this emergency situation. That was because they were used to any conditions in battle. Moreover, the current opponents are only the police, who only dare deal with small communities. One of them, feeling bored, suddenly approached the bank manager, and for no apparent reason, he immediately killed him. Scene back to Mike, who now is trying to find Kenny. He felt he had to take responsibility for Kenny's safety. Mike, who was assisted by one of his friends, was desperate to get closer to the bank, even though this case was no longer the job of the police but the task of the SWAT team. In the end, Mike was able to find Kenny, and Kenny is relieved to now be with Mike. Then the scene shows SWAT troops with full weaponry, ready to enter the bank. The robbers, who did not want to just stay silent, then lined up the hostages to be used as shields. One of the robbers ordered the hostages to get out by inserting a bomb into a mother's pocket, and unfortunately, when one of the SWAT teams tried to save the hostages, the bomb exploded and killed one member of the SWAT team. Seeing that some of its members had died, the SWAT team was very angry and decided to enter to surround them until there was a shootout. One of the remaining robbers tried to escape with the money. Mike, who was still with Kenny and one of his friends, was shocked by the robber approaching them. Mike's friend died, and Mike's leg was shot by the robber. Realizing that Mike was cornered, the robber approached to shoot Mike in the head, but at the same time, the robber was successfully shot by Kenny, then followed by shots from Agent Rossi. After everything was finished, they showed Mike, who had been treated and was now in an ambulance. Then Mike was approached by Lisa to apologize. Lisa feels guilty because she has hated Mike for her mother's death. Lisa also shared the news that Steve was getting better. 1 year later, the movie shows Mike being surprised by the arrival of Lisa, Steve, his grandchildren, and Kenny's family, and then the movie is end.